The Zenthari war fleet appeared in the darkness of space, like a swarm of metal predators surrounding their next meal. 300 warships hung in perfect formation around the small blue planet that the locals called Earth. Admiral Kreshtar stood on his command bridge and watched the tactical display with satisfaction. His 4 eyes gleamed in the red light as he studied the primitive world below. This would be an easy conquest. The Empire had done this dozens of times before with other young species. Show overwhelming force and demand surrender. Harvest the planet's resources while the population was still too shocked to resist. It always worked. It would work again. Kreshtar gestured with one clawed hand and gave the command to begin the intimidation broadcast. The message went out on all frequencies, in what their linguists promised was the dominant language of this world. The transmission was simple and direct. Surrender now or be destroyed. The Admiral leaned back in his command throne and waited for the inevitable response. Fear. Panic. Desperate pleas for mercy. He had heard them all before from dozens of other species. What came back through the speakers made Kreshtar's blood turn cold in his veins. The voice was calm and spoke in perfect Zenthari language with flawless pronunciation. It said that the United Earth Defense Command acknowledged their presence and kindly requested they maintain their current position while Earth prepared a response. The estimated time was 12 minutes. Please wait. 12 minutes. The prey was asking the predators to wait politely, like guests at a formal reception. Laughter rippled through the communication channels connecting all the Zenthari ships. Junior officers made jokes about human arrogance and stupidity. Veteran commanders shook their heads at yet another primitive species that did not understand its place in the galaxy. But Kreshtar had not survived 40 years of military service by ignoring unusual details. Something about that transmission bothered him deeply. The calmness of it, the confidence in every word, the complete and total absence of fear in that human voice. These were not the reactions of prey facing certain death. The Admiral turned to his tactical officer and demanded a full report on Earth's defensive capabilities. The response was not encouraging in the way Kreshtar expected. The officer reported minimal defenses, primitive fusion drives on most vessels, kinetic weapons that were laughably outdated, some directed energy systems that might damage a scout ship but nothing that could threaten even their lightest escorts. But then the officer mentioned something strange. The humans were evacuating their orbital defense platforms. They were pulling their satellites back toward the planet's atmosphere. They were clearing the space around their world. Kreshtar felt his secondary heart skip a beat as understanding dawned. They were not retreating. They were clearing the battlefield. They were making room for something. But what could a primitive species possibly have that required clearing an entire orbital space? The 12 minutes passed in heavy silence on the Zenthari flagship. Every officer stared at their displays waiting for something to happen. When it finally did, nobody could quite believe what their sensors were reporting. Ships began appearing from behind Earth's moon. More ships emerged from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Then, impossibly more vessels rose up from within Earth's own atmosphere. Hundreds of ships materialized in space as if they had been hiding there all along. But these were not the crude primitive vessels the Zenthari had observed in their initial scans. These ships were different. They were sleek and predatory-looking. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear as dark wounds cut into the fabric of space itself. At the center of the formation, one ship dwarfed all the others. It was so massive that it seemed to bend the starlight around its hull. Strange symbols marked its surface along with a designation written in crisp white letters that read, UES Defiance. The communications officer's voice cracked with uncertainty as he reported that the flagship was hailing them. But the truly terrifying part was that it was broadcasting in perfect Zenthari primary dialect, not the trade language that most species used. Not the simplified version that foreigners learned. Perfect Zenthari, as if the speaker had been born and raised in the Empire itself. The view screen activated without Kreshtar giving permission, and a human face appeared. It was a male, with graying hair at the temples and eyes that held no warmth at all. Those eyes reminded Kreshtar of a hunting creature studying prey before the final strike. The human spoke in flawless Zenthari and identified himself as Fleet Admiral Jacob Morrison of the United Earth Space Navy. He thanked Admiral Kreshtar for waiting so patiently. The gratitude was noted and appreciated. Then, Morrison's image pulled back to reveal a bridge filled with technology that should not exist on such a young world. Holographic displays showed information that should have been impossible for humans to possess. Including Kreshtar noticed with growing horror the exact positions and shield frequencies of every single ship in the Zenthari fleet. Morrison continued speaking in that calm, measured tone. He explained that the Zenthari were not actually the first species to arrive at Earth with hostile intentions. They were the seventh. The previous 6 had made the same assumptions that Kreshtar was making right now. They saw a young species barely 3 centuries into space travel and thought them easy prey. Easy resources to harvest. Easy technology to steal. Easy populations to enslave. Morrison's expression never changed as he detailed what happened to those previous 6 species. The first species, called the Vekkari, had taught humans faster-than-light travel when their ships were captured and reverse-engineered. The second species, known as the Drool Collective, had introduced humans to energy-shielding technology. The third gave humans plasma weaponry. Each species that came to conquer Earth instead became unwilling teachers. Humans learned fast, Morrison explained. They were aggressive students. They had enjoyed 50 years since the last invasion attempt to perfect all those lessons. Morrison paused and then offered Admiral Kreshtar one opportunity to withdraw. Turn the fleet around and leave this system immediately. Do that, and the Zenthari would survive to warn the rest of the galaxy what they found at Earth. Refused the offer, and Morrison gestured casually to something off-screen. The tactical display updated with new information that made every officer on the Zenthari bridge go pale. The human fleet had just multiplied in size again. Ships were decloaking throughout the entire system. The Sentry, NETs, each one moved into a firing position that would create perfect crossfire through the Zenthari formation. They were surrounded. They were outgunned. And the humans knew everything about Zenthari military technology and combat doctrine. Someone had been talking. Someone had given away the Empire's secrets. Or more likely, the humans had simply taken those secrets from species who thought themselves too powerful to ever lose. Morrison gave Admiral Kreshtar 5 minutes to decide. After that, he would assume the Zenthari had chosen to stay for class. The transmission ended, leaving Kreshtar staring at his tactical display and the impossible situation it showed. Behind him, his bridge crew waited in absolute silence. The laughter had died completely. The confidence had evaporated like water in vacuum. And for the first time in Zenthari military history, an admiral faced a choice his ancestors had never imagined: retreat in shame or be harvested by prey that had evolved into apex predators. The command chamber of the Zenthari flagship fell into a silence that felt heavier than the vacuum of space itself. Admiral Kreshtar stood perfectly still while his mind raced through possibilities. His tactical officer, Sub-Commander Vrelkoth, worked frantically at his station, pulling up historical data from the Empire's intelligence archives. His claws trembled slightly as he made the connections that everyone had missed. Vrelkoth reported his findings in a voice that shook with barely controlled fear. 6 different species had gone completely silent in this sector of space over the past century. The Vekkari had stopped all communications 70 years ago. The Drool went silent 60 years back. Then, the Hakon, then the Morthrin, then the Skeks. And most recently, the Valdrex Empire had ceased all transmissions just 14 years ago. The intelligence services had assumed these civilizations had collapsed from internal problems or overextended themselves into economic ruin. Nobody had considered the alternative. Nobody had imagined that all 6 had been destroyed by the same primitive species. Kreshtar felt his secondary heart skip another beat. The Valdrex had been a Tier 2 civilization. They possessed technology far more advanced than anything the Zenthari had developed. If the Valdrex had fallen to these humans, then his fleet was already dead. They just had not realized it yet. A. Properly. Being 5. Being 5. Being 5. Being 5. The Admiral opened a secure command channel that connected him to all his ship captains. Their faces appeared on dozens of small screens surrounding his command throne. Every single one of them had seen the same tactical data. They all understood what it meant, even if they did not want to admit it. Kreshtar asked for recommendations, and the responses came quickly. Captain Thelkor, of the dreadnought Eternal Victory, argued passionately for immediate attack. The Zenthari did not flee from primitives regardless of what stolen technology they had scavenged from previous victims. To retreat without firing a single shot would bring eternal dishonor to the Empire and shame to every family represented in the fleet. But Captain Shenrak, of the carrier Storm's Edge, disagreed just as passionately. He pointed at the tactical displays and demanded that everyone actually look at what they were facing. The humans were not bluffing. Their positions created a perfect killing field. Their targeting solutions showed they knew exactly where every Zenthari ship would try to evade. They knew the shield frequencies, which meant they knew how to collapse those shields with minimal effort. This was not a battlefield. This was an execution chamber waiting for the condemned to step into place. The debate grew heated as other captains joined in with their opinions. Some argued that the human capabilities must be exaggerated, some kind of technological trick or elaborate bluff designed to make the Zenthari retreat without fighting. Others pointed out that 300 warships represented enormous resources and prestige. The political cost of retreat would be devastating to everyone involved. Kreshtar listened to all of it while his mind worked through the implications. His tactical officer had pulled up another piece of buried intelligence. A report from 5 years ago about a Skex merchant vessel that had escaped an encounter with unknown attackers near this system. The survivors reported that their attackers had spoken perfect Skex language and asked detailed questions about nearby civilizations before releasing the ship with a warning to spread word that Earth wanted to be left alone. The humans had been studying the galaxy for years. They had been capturing ships and crews, learning languages and customs, building detailed intelligence profiles on every species. Within 100 light years, they knew everything about Zenthari technology because they had probably interrogated Zenthari prisoners or prisoners from species that traded with the Empire. They had been preparing for this exact moment. Admiral Kreshtar made his decision. He had not survived 40 years of combat by letting pride override survival instinct. Retreat was shameful, but death was permanent. He ordered his navigation officer to begin calculating jump coordinates for a full fleet withdrawal back to Zenthari space. Captain Thelkor protested immediately. The High Council would demand explanations. They would see this as cowardice. They would strip ranks and dishonor families. But Kreshtar cut him off with a sharp gesture. If the Council wanted to lead fleets into suicide missions, they were welcome to take command themselves. He was transmitting full tactical data back to the Empire. The Council could review the information and understand what Earth had become. Let them see that humanity was not the easy prey everyone assumed. Kreshtar opened a direct communication channel to the human flagship. Fleet Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen immediately, as if he had been waiting for this exact call. The Admiral spoke in his own Zenthari language, refusing to be intimidated by Morrison's superior linguistic skills. He stated formally that the Zenthari fleet would withdraw from this system. The Empire acknowledged human territorial claims to this region of space. Morrison nodded slowly with what might have been respect in his eyes. He said that he appreciated commanders who valued their crews more than their egos. Then, his expression hardened slightly. He asked Kreshtar to deliver a message to the Zenthari leadership. Earth was no longer a target for expansion. Humans were not interested in joining galactic society as inferiors, and they were not interested in conquest for its own sake. But they absolutely would not tolerate aggression. The next fleet that arrived with hostile intent would not receive a warning like this one. They would receive what Morrison called a demonstration. He emphasized that the Zenthari should understand the difference between those two things. Kreshtar acknowledged the message and promised the Empire would be informed. Morrison wished him safe travels and expressed hope that their next meeting would happen under better circumstances. The transmission ended, leaving Kreshtar alone, with his thoughts and the enormous task of explaining this situation to his superiors. The Zenthari fleet began its jump sequence. Ships powered up their faster-than-light drives and prepared to leave this cursed system. Kreshtar watched the human vessels on his tactical display. They were not pursuing. They were not celebrating. They simply maintained their positions with the calm patience of experienced soldiers who knew that victory came not from one battle, but from the reputation built across many encounters. As his flagship entered jump space, Kreshtar began composing his report in his mind. How did one explain to a 1,000-year-old empire that the natural order of the galaxy had been turned upside down? How did he describe that prey had become predators? That humanity had taken every attack against them and transformed it into education and advancement? They had studied their enemies. They had learned from them. They had improved on everything they captured until their technology exceeded that of civilizations 1,000 times older. The journey back to Zenthari Prime would take 6 days. 6 days to compile the most comprehensive tactical report of his career. 6 days for his crew to process the shame of retreat and the relief of survival. 6 days for word to spread through informal channels about what had happened at Earth. By the time they emerged in Zenthari home space, everyone already knew the truth. The empire that never retreated had fled from a species barely 3 centuries into spaceflight. The empire that conquered dozens of worlds had been outmaneuvered and outgunned by primitives who learned faster than anyone thought possible. The High Council convened immediately upon their arrival. Kreshtar stood in the great chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of the 7 ruling families. He presented his report with clinical detachment. He showed them the tactical data. He played the recording of Morrison's transmission. He explained how the humans had known everything about Zenthari capabilities, including details that should have been impossible for them to access. Some council members reacted with rage, some with disbelief. But a few of the older members, like Patriarch Vornash, studied the data with growing understanding and something that looked like fear. They recognized what the younger members refused to see. Humanity was not just another species to be conquered. They were something new and dangerous. They were a civilization that had compressed 1,000 years of development into a few decades through sheer necessity and aggression. The council debated for hours about how to respond. Some wanted to gather a larger fleet and return to crush Earth before they grew even stronger. Others argued for informing the Galactic Council and letting the greater powers deal with this threat. But Patriarch Vornash proposed something different. He suggested that perhaps it was time to recognize humanity as equals and attempt diplomatic relations before the situation escalated further. The vote was close, but eventually wisdom prevailed over pride. The Zenthari Empire would declare Earth's solar system a restricted zone. No ships would enter without permission, and they would send a message to humanity proposing formal diplomatic contact. Kreshtar left the council chamber, knowing his career would survive, but his reputation was permanently damaged. But he found he did not care as much as he thought he would. He had saved 70,000 lives. He had brought back intelligence that might save the Empire from making a fatal mistake. And he had looked into the eyes of Fleet Admiral Jacob Morrison and recognized a fellow professional, a commander who understood that real strength came not from winning easy battles, but from knowing when to fight and when to preserve your forces for battles that mattered. The galaxy was changing. The old certainties were crumbling. And humanity was at the center of that change, whether anyone was ready for it or not. News of the Zenthari retreat spread through established galactic space, like radiation from a dying star. Within 1 month of Admiral Kreshtar's return, every major civilization in the region knew about Earth and the species that had somehow transformed from prey into apex predator in less than a single century. The reactions varied wildly depending on each civilization's culture and strategic situation. The Thex Concordat was a loose federation of merchant guilds that had survived for thousands of years by knowing when to trade and when to flee. Their leadership took one look at the Zenthari tactical reports and immediately updated all their navigation charts. Earth's solar system was marked with the highest possible hazard warning. All member vessels received strict orders to avoid that entire region of space. The Concordat had not survived this long by testing the defenses of species that could destroy Zenthari war fleets. But the Corvani hegemony reacted very differently. They were an aggressive and proud warrior culture that viewed the Zenthari as weak and overcautious. Their war council dismissed Kreshtar's report as the excuses of a coward who had lost his nerve. They began planning their own expedition to Earth. 3 full battle groups were assigned to investigate what they called the human situation. The orders were clear: seize Earth's technology by force and return with spoils that would elevate the hegemony to total dominance in the region. The Corvani fleet departed amid great celebrations and promises of glory. They never returned. 6 weeks after entering Earth's solar system, all communication from the Corvani expedition ceased completely. No distress calls, no battle reports, no debris fields detected by long-range sensors, just silence, as complete and final as death itself. It was as if 300 ships and 50,000 soldiers had simply vanished from existence. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. The council chamber existed in neutral space, a massive station where representatives from 200 different civilizations gathered to resolve disputes and maintain the fragile peace that kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart in endless warfare. Ambassador Velstan represented the Zenthari Empire at this session. He was old and experienced in the subtle politics of the council. He understood that today's discussion would reshape galactic civilization in ways nobody could fully predict. High Arbiter Zendol called the session to order. Zendol was a crystalline being whose species had maintained order in the council for 10,000 years. Its voice resonated through the chamber as it stated the situation plainly. A young species had demonstrated the capability to destroy military forces from established civilizations. 8 separate expeditions had now failed to return from Earth's region of space. The council had to determine an appropriate response. Ambassador Pril Knox of the Thex Concordat spoke first. His suggestion was immediate quarantine. Restrict all travel to Earth's region. Let the humans develop in isolation until they were ready to join galactic society on peaceful terms. Do not provoke them. Do not test them. Simply leave them alone. But Ambassador Kresh of the Corvani hegemony disagreed violently, even though his own people had just lost 3 battle groups. He argued through a video transmission that the humans had demonstrated hostility to everyone who approached. They were a threat that would only grow stronger if left unchecked. They had to be neutralized before they began expanding their territory and threatening established civilizations. Velstan interrupted to correct that statement. The humans had not demonstrated hostility. They had demonstrated self-defense. There was a critical difference. Every single species that entered their system had come with conquest in mind. The humans had not initiated even one aggressive action beyond their own borders. They had simply defended themselves against invasion. The Corvani ambassador snarled that it was only a matter of time before Earth began expanding. Better to contain the threat now, while they still could. But Velstan asked a simple question. Could they actually contain Earth? He pulled up the tactical data that Admiral Kreshtar had collected. Weapon systems that exceeded Zenthari capabilities. Ships that could decloak inside enemy formations. Perfect intelligence on multiple species military doctrines. The Corvani had sent forces twice the size of the Zenthari expedition, and where were they now? A smaller ambassador, named Trelkis, from the Memnon Collective spoke nervously. Perhaps they were approaching this situation incorrectly. Had anyone actually attempted peaceful contact? Had anyone offered trade instead of conquest? Maybe the humans would respond differently to friendship than they did to invasion. Velstan explained that the Skeks had tried exactly that approach 5 years ago. A merchant vessel approached Earth broadcasting peaceful intentions. The humans captured the ship and interrogated the crew about regional politics and technology. Then, they released the crew with a warning to spread word that Earth was not interested in contact at that time. The Skeks complied. Their report had been filed and then ignored until recently, when people started connecting the pattern of disappearances. High Arbiter Zendol summarized what the evidence showed. The humans captured ships, and extracted information. They studied languages and technology. They learned about galactic civilization without actually joining it. Then they released witnesses who could spread word of their capabilities. That demonstrated both advanced capability and remarkable restraint. They could have killed every prisoner but chose not to. Ambassador Vishara of the Daleth Union asked the question everyone was thinking. What did humanity actually want? What were their goals? The chamber fell silent because nobody had an answer. The humans had not attempted diplomatic relations. They had not sought trade agreements. They had not expanded beyond their home system. They simply existed, growing stronger, learning from every species foolish enough to test their defenses, building capabilities that exceeded civilizations thousands of years older. Then, a new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Every ambassador turned to see who had interrupted. It was Ambassador Tolvek of the Yithral Imperium. The Yithral were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the entire galaxy. They rarely involved themselves in council affairs because they considered most disputes beneath their attention. Their presence here meant they viewed the Earth situation as genuinely significant. Tolvek announced that the Yithral had also sent an expedition to Earth. But unlike the military fleets that preceded them, they had sent a single, unarmed science vessel. The crew consisted of linguists and diplomats and anthropologists. They broadcast peaceful intentions on all frequencies and requested dialogue rather than conflict. Every ambassador leaned forward in their seats. This was new information that nobody had heard before. Tolvek continued his report. The humans had responded to their peaceful approach. The Yithral ship was permitted to approach Earth under heavy escort. They met with human diplomatic representatives. They spent 3 weeks in detailed discussions learning about human culture and history and motivations. Tolvek could now answer Ambassador Vishara's question. The humans wanted what every young species wanted: survival, security, and recognition as equals, rather than inferiors or resources to be exploited. The Corvani ambassador laughed bitterly at the word equals. The humans had existed in space for less time than most council members had maintained their historical archives. How could they possibly claim equality with civilizations thousands of years old? Tolvek's response was cold and direct. The humans had earned equality through capability. They emerged into a galaxy that immediately tried to conquer them. They were attacked by the Vekari within months of achieving faster-than-light travel. Instead of being destroyed, they adapted. They took what their enemies brought and made it better. Each attack made them stronger and faster and more sophisticated. They learned that the galaxy viewed young species as resources to be harvested. They responded by becoming impossible to harvest. High Arbiter Zendol asked what humanity's actual intentions were according to the Yithral observations. Tolvek explained that the humans wished to be left alone until they were ready to engage with galactic society on their own terms. They did not want conquest or endless conflict, but they absolutely would not tolerate aggression. The human fleet admiral named Jacob Morrison had been very clear about this. Attack us, and we will take everything you bring. Leave us alone, and we will have no quarrel. The council debated for many more hours. Some members argued for immediate military action. Others pushed for complete isolation. Still others suggested attempting peaceful relations. Finally, High Arbiter Zendol called for a formal vote on a resolution. Earth's solar system would be declared a protected zone under Council authority. No military vessels could enter without explicit permission from both the Council and Earth's government. Trade and diplomatic missions could proceed only with prior approval and heavy restrictions. The vote was extremely close, but the resolution passed. The galaxy would leave Earth alone. Not out of respect, but out of fear and cold, pragmatic calculation. It was not the recognition as equals that humanity might have hoped for, but it was safety and breathing room to continue developing. As the session ended and ambassadors returned to their ships, Velstan approached Tolvek privately. He asked what the humans were actually like, based on the Yithral diplomat's personal observations. Tolvek considered the question carefully before answering. The humans were intense, curious, proud. They had a cultural saying that Tolvek found fascinating. What does not kill us makes us stronger. They seemed to have taken that philosophy and applied it at a civilizational level. They had transformed every attack into education. They had turned warfare into research and development. Velstan revealed that Patriarch Vornash had said something similar. That the Zenthari had been like humans once, when they were young and fighting for survival. Tolvek agreed that perhaps all successful species shared certain traits. The ones that survived their vulnerable early period did so through adaptability and aggression and intelligence. Humanity had simply compressed that entire process into an impossibly short time frame. Velstan asked the question that haunted him. What would happen when humans decided Earth was too small? When they began expanding into the galaxy as a major power? Tolvek was silent for a long moment before answering. The galaxy would change, radically and permanently. The only question was whether the established civilizations would be ready for that change. 2 years passed after the Galactic Council voted to protect Earth's territory. 2 years of uneasy peace, in which humanity continued building their capabilities, while the galaxy watched nervously. Most civilizations respected the Council's restrictions. They maintained their distance and observed from afar as human ships moved throughout their system constructing new stations and facilities. But not every species in the galaxy belonged to the Council or cared about its rules. The Kravik Dominion operated on the fringes of civilized space. They were raiders and pirates who survived through aggression and the exploitation of weaker colonies. They sold stolen technology on black markets. They enslaved populations from worlds that could not defend themselves. The Council had tried to eliminate them dozens of times, but the Kravik always retreated into lawless territories where Council forces could not follow. War Chief Greltok saw the Council's protection of Earth as an opportunity rather than a warning. He gathered his clan leaders in his fortress and laid out his vision. Imagine a species with technology powerful enough to destroy both Zenthari and Corvani fleets. Protected by Council decree, but sitting isolated in their home system. A vault full of treasures just waiting to be cracked open by someone bold enough to try. The Kravik plan was brutally simple. Assemble the largest raiding fleet in their history. Jump into Earth's system fast and hard. Grab whatever technology they could carry. Disappear back into the lawless territories before the Council could organize a response. By the time anyone reacted, the Kravik would be gone, with enough advanced technology to sell for generations. Greltok assembled 500 ships. Every clan contributed their best raiders and warriors. It was the largest military force the Kravik had ever put together. They were confident, they were hungry, and they believed the stories about human capabilities were exaggerated by commanders too afraid to fight properly. The Kravik fleet jumped into Earth's system ready for glory and profit. The humans were waiting. Not with the defensive posture the Kravik expected. Not with warnings or negotiations. The human fleet that emerged to meet them was 3 times larger than what had faced the Zenthari 2 years earlier. Humanity had not been idle during the peace. They had been building at an incredible pace. Fleet Admiral Jacob Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance. The flagship was now accompanied by 4 sister ships of equal size. Around them moved 1,000 smaller vessels in perfect formation. 2 years of relative peace had been used very productively indeed. Morrison opened a communication channel to the Kravik fleet. He spoke in perfect Kravik battle dialect, as if he had been born among the raider clans. He stated clearly that Kravik vessels had entered Earth space with hostile intent in direct violation of Galactic Council restrictions. This was their only warning. Depart immediately, or be destroyed. There would be no negotiation, and no second chances. War Chief Greltok laughed when he heard the transmission. 1,000 human ships against 500 Kravik raiders. Those were better odds than previous fleets had faced. But the Kravik were legendary warriors. They did not flee from battles just because the enemy had numerical advantage. He sent back a mocking response and ordered his fleet to attack. Morrison's expression did not change. He simply said that the Kravik decision was unfortunate. Then he added that at least their fate would serve an educational purpose. He gave the order to engage. The battle lasted exactly 90 seconds from first shot to final Kravik surrender. The human fleet did not meet the Kravik charge head-on. They phased away using faster-than-light technology on a tactical scale. Human ships appeared throughout the Kravik formation and opened fire from point-blank range. Plasma cannons that had been refined and improved since the Zenthari encounter cut through Kravik shields like they did not exist. Missiles accelerating at impossible velocities swarmed the Raider heavy ships. The 5 human super dreadnoughts coordinated their fire with perfect machine precision. They systematically destroyed every Kravik command ship in the fleet within seconds. War Chief Greltok watched in absolute horror as his grand fleet dissolved around him. The humans were not just winning, they were surgical, efficient, destroying exactly what they chose to destroy while leaving other ships crippled but intact. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration of overwhelming superiority. Morrison ordered ceasefire after 90 seconds. He opened another channel to the surviving Kravik vessels. They had 2 choices now: surrender and prepare to be boarded, or attempt to run and be destroyed before they could jump to safety. The decision had to be made immediately. The surviving Kravik ships surrendered without hesitation. Barely a third of the original fleet remained functional. But Morrison was not finished with his message. He opened a new communication channel that broadcast not just to the Kravik fleet but to every monitoring station and listening post within 50 light-years. Every empire and colony and independent merchant with a working receiver would hear what he was about to say. The transmission began with Morrison identifying himself and his position. Then he explained what had just occurred. The Kravik Dominion had violated Council restrictions and attacked Earth with intent to conquer. The transmission included complete tactical data from the 90-second battle. Every weapon system was documented. Every tactical maneuver was recorded. The total and absolute destruction of a force that had terrorized this region of space for generations was shown in perfect detail. Morrison continued speaking in a voice that was cold and controlled. Earth had tolerated attacks since first reaching the stars. 8 separate civilizations had tested human defenses. All had failed. But today's demonstration was different. Today, humanity did not simply defend. They overwhelmed the enemy with such efficiency that resistance was meaningless. Morrison wanted every species watching to understand something very clearly. Earth was not prey. Humans were not resources to be harvested. They were not primitives to be exploited or enslaved. But Morrison emphasized that humans were not conquerors either. They did not want to dominate the galaxy. They did not want to build an empire on the ruins of other species. What humanity wanted was simple: respect, recognition, and peace. The Galactic Council had offered protection in exchange for isolation. Humans had honored that agreement faithfully. But today's attack proved that declarations and resolutions were not enough to ensure safety. Morrison announced that effective immediately, Earth was establishing a defense perimeter extending 50 light-years from their sun. Any unauthorized military vessel entering this region would be disabled and captured. Any armed fleet approaching their borders would be met with overwhelming force. Humanity was not asking permission from the Council. They were informing the galaxy of new reality. Then Morrison addressed the Galactic Council directly. Humanity was ready to discuss formal diplomatic relations, not as primitives seeking acceptance into galactic society, but as equals bringing unique capabilities to the community of civilizations. Humans offered advanced technology sharing, military alliance for mutual defense, cultural and scientific exchange. In return, they expected recognition as a sovereign power with full council membership. Morrison's next words were directed at all civilizations watching the transmission. Earth was open to peaceful contact. Trade and diplomatic exchange and scientific collaboration were all welcome. Humans were not enemies of any species unless those species chose to make them enemies. Finally, Morrison addressed anyone still considering an attack on Earth. Learn from today's demonstration. Learn from the Zenthari, and Corvani, and Kravik. Humanity was tired of teaching this particular lesson. The next fleet that approached with hostile intent would not face capture. They would face complete extinction. Anyone was welcome to test that promise at their own risk. The transmission ended. Human ships began securing the disabled Kravik vessels and processing prisoners. But Morrison's attention had already moved past the immediate battle to the larger implications of what had just happened. His communications officer, Commander Lisa Holland, approached quietly. She reported that responses were flooding in from across the region. The Galactic Council had called another emergency session. The Zenthari Empire had transmitted formal greetings and congratulations. The Thex Concordat was requesting immediate trade negotiations. Everyone was paying attention now. Earth was no longer an isolated curiosity. Humanity was a factor in regional politics that could not be ignored. Morrison nodded slowly. This was the moment he had been preparing for since that first Zenthari fleet arrived. The moment when humanity stopped being prey and started being a civilization with real power and agency in galactic affairs. He ordered preparation of a full diplomatic delegation for the council session. Cultural attachés and security personnel and negotiators. They would not go to the council as supplicants begging for acceptance. They would go as equals, demanding recognition. Commander Holland asked quietly if Morrison really believed the council would accept humanity. Actually accept them. And not just acknowledge their military strength. Morrison looked out at the stars surrounding Earth. At the vast galaxy that had tried so hard to conquer his species, and instead taught them how to be strong. Some civilizations would accept humans genuinely. Others would resist. But that was their problem, not humanity's. Earth had proven it could survive anyone's hostility. Now they would discover if they could thrive with someone's friendship. On Zenthari Prime, Patriarch Vornash watched Morrison's transmission with deep satisfaction. He had known this moment was coming. The only surprise was how quickly humanity had progressed from defensive force to legitimate regional power. He ordered Ambassador Velstan summoned immediately. The Zenthari would support Earth's application for council membership. They would be the first major civilization to formally recognize humans as equals. His aide warned that supporting human membership was politically risky. The council would resist. But Vornash replied that the council had resisted acknowledging reality 2 years ago. And look how that worked out. Humans were not asking permission anymore. They were informing everyone of the new reality. The Zenthari could adapt to that reality or become irrelevant. Vornash chose adaptation. The Galactic Council convened 3 days after Fleet Admiral Morrison's transmission echoed across 50 light-years of space. The council station existed in neutral territory where representatives from 200 civilizations gathered to shape the future of their shared galaxy. Today, that future was about to change in ways that many council members still could not fully accept. High Arbiter Zendol stood at the center of the Great Chamber. The crystalline being had maintained order in this council for 10,000 years. It had seen civilizations rise and fall. It had witnessed wars that consumed entire star systems. But what was about to happen today was unprecedented in all those millennia of history. A species was demanding council membership not through cultural achievement or technological advancement or diplomatic sophistication. They were demanding it through the demonstrated ability to destroy anyone who opposed them. Ambassador Velstan of the Zenthari Empire stood beside the human delegation. He had requested this position specifically. The Zenthari would be the first to publicly support Earth's application for membership. It was a calculated political risk, but Velstan and Patriarch Vornash believed it was the right decision both morally and strategically. The human delegation was led by Ambassador Helen Rodriguez. She was Earth's newly appointed representative to the Galactic Council. She stood calmly in front of 200 different species. Some were significantly larger than humans. Some were smaller. Some were crystalline or gaseous or existed in forms that humans could barely comprehend. But Rodriguez showed no fear or uncertainty. She represented a species that had earned its place through blood and determination. Rodriguez began speaking, and her words were simultaneously translated into dozens of languages. She stated formally that humanity requested recognition and full council membership. Earth had met every requirement listed in the council charter. They had demonstrated advanced technology. They had shown sophisticated culture. They possessed the capability to defend their interests. What they had not done was wait for permission to exist as equals. An ambassador from a minor civilization immediately objected. The human species had existed in space for less than 3 centuries. Most council members had millennia of spacefaring experience. How could humanity possibly claim equality with civilizations thousands of years old? Rodriguez smiled, and Velstan recognized that expression. It was the same smile Fleet Admiral Morrison had shown when his fleet surrounded the Zinthari forces. Confident, certain, almost predatory. Rodriguez explained that humanity had compressed millennia of hard lessons into those 3 centuries. They had not enjoyed the luxury of gradual development or peaceful first contacts. The Vekari had attacked within months of Earth achieving faster-than-light capability. Humans had been fighting for survival ever since. That experience taught things that comfortable civilizations often forgot. Adapt or die. Learn from enemies. Turn weakness into strength. Every species that attacked Earth became an unwilling teacher. Humanity learned those lessons faster than anyone thought possible. Another ambassador argued that taking technology from defeated enemies was theft, not legitimate achievement. Rodriguez countered sharply. That was survival, and it was hypocritical for established civilizations to complain about it. How many council members had built their empires through conquest? How many had absorbed technologies from species they defeated or enslaved? The only difference was that humanity did not have centuries to make their aggression look civilized and acceptable. They did what they had to do to survive, and they did it with remarkable efficiency. The chamber erupted in angry debate. Some ambassadors shouted that humans were too aggressive and dangerous. Others argued that humanity had simply responded to the aggression directed at them. Still others worried about the precedent this would set for other young species who might use military force to demand recognition. But several ambassadors from older civilizations remained silent. They studied the human delegation carefully. They recognized something in Rodriguez and her team. The same qualities their own species had possessed when they were young and fighting for survival. The determination, the adaptability, the refusal to accept arbitrary limitations imposed by others. Ambassador Tolvek of the Ythral Imperium finally spoke. The chamber fell silent immediately. When the Ythral spoke, everyone listened. Tolvek reminded the council that his species had sent a peaceful mission to Earth. They had met with human diplomats. They had learned about human culture and motivations. The humans were not mindless aggressors. They were rational actors responding to an irrational situation. Every species that approached Earth with peaceful intent had been treated peacefully. Every species that approached with hostile intent had been destroyed or driven away. Tolvek stated clearly that humanity had earned membership through capability. The Council Charter did not specify how technology had to be acquired. It only required that species possess advanced capabilities and demonstrate the ability to participate in galactic affairs. Humanity met those requirements, regardless of how anyone felt about their methods. High Arbiter Zendol called for order as the debate continued. Hours passed with arguments flying back and forth. Some council members threatened to withdraw if humans were admitted. Others promised to support Earth's application. The political calculations were complex. Everyone understood that this decision would reshape galactic power structures for generations to come. Finally, Zendol called for a formal vote. The question was simple. Did humanity meet the requirements for council membership? Not whether members liked how those requirements were met, simply whether they were met. The vote was extremely close. For several minutes, the count remained balanced. Then, slowly, the total shifted toward acceptance. Older civilizations voted in favor, recognizing capability when they saw it. Younger civilizations split their votes based on their own security concerns and political calculations. In the end, the resolution passed by the narrowest margin in Council history. Humanity was granted provisional membership subject to review in 50 years. It was not full, permanent membership. But it was recognition. It was a seat at the table where galactic decisions were made. Rodriguez accepted the decision with dignity and grace. She thanked the Council for their consideration. She acknowledged that provisional status was not ideal but stated clearly that 50 years would be more than enough time to prove humanity belonged permanently. By then, the galaxy would wonder how they ever functioned without Earth's contributions. As the session ended and ambassadors departed, Velstan approached Rodriguez privately. He apologized that the membership was only provisional. Rodriguez shrugged, casually. Humans were used to having to prove themselves constantly. 50 years was nothing. Earth had transformed from prey to predator in less than a century. What would they accomplish with half a century of actual participation in galactic civilization? Velstan found himself believing her completely. He had seen what humans could do when fighting for survival. What would they achieve when they could focus on creation instead of destruction? What innovations would they bring? What problems would they solve? What contributions would they make to the shared knowledge of the galaxy? Rodriguez returned to her ship and prepared for departure back to Earth. She would carry news of their provisional acceptance. Some humans would be disappointed it was not full membership. But most would understand this was just another challenge to overcome. Humanity specialized in overcoming challenges that seemed impossible. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Morrison received the news with quiet satisfaction. Provisional membership was enough for now. It gave Earth legitimacy and protection under Council law. It opened doors for trade and cultural exchange. Most importantly, it meant humanity could stop focusing purely on military defense and start exploring what they could become as a peaceful member of galactic society. But Morrison was not naive. He knew some civilizations would never fully accept Earth. Pride and prejudice ran deep. Some species would always view humans as upstart primitives who got lucky. Some would plot to undermine Earth's position. Some would wait for humanity to make mistakes they could exploit. That was fine. Morrison and his generation had prepared for that. They had built Earth's defenses to overwhelming levels. They had established intelligence networks throughout the region. They had learned the languages and customs and weaknesses of every major power. If peaceful coexistence was possible, they would embrace it. If not, they were ready for that too. Commander Holland asked Morrison what he thought the future held for humanity. Morrison considered the question while looking at Earth through the viewport. Their beautiful blue world that had been attacked so many times. The home that humanity had defended with such ferocity and determination. Morrison said he believed the future would be what humans made of it. They had survived first contact. They had survived multiple wars. They had survived the prejudice of civilizations that considered themselves superior. Now, they had a chance to show what humans could build and create and contribute when not fighting for bare survival. The galaxy had laughed when it first saw Earth. They had viewed humanity as easy prey, primitive resources to be harvested. But those days were over. The armada had arrived and laughed until the flagship spoke their language and taught them fear and respect. Now, humanity stood as equals among the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. Not through permission, but through capability. Not through diplomacy, but through demonstrated strength. Earth had taken every attack and transformed it into education. Every enemy had become a teacher. Every defeat had been turned into victory through adaptation and determination. Some species would accept humans as partners and allies. Others would remain hostile and suspicious. But none would ever again make the mistake of viewing Earth as easy prey. Humanity had earned their place through blood and tears, and the absolute refusal to surrender or accept defeat. Morrison turned away from the viewport and began planning for the next phase. Building trade relationships, establishing cultural exchanges, sharing technology with allies, contributing to galactic scientific research. protecting weaker species from exploitation. All the things that true civilization required, beyond simply surviving and fighting. The galaxy had spent thousands of years developing its civilization. Humanity would bring fresh perspectives and new approaches. They would challenge assumptions and push boundaries. They would force ancient species to reconsider things they had taken for granted. And in 50 years, when the Council reviewed Earth's provisional status, there would be no question about making it permanent. Humanity would have proven beyond any doubt that they belonged not just as members, but as leaders helping to shape the future of galactic civilization. The journey from prey to predator to partner was complete. But the real journey of what humanity would become was only just beginning. And the galaxy, ready or not, was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they turned their remarkable abilities toward creation instead of survival. Rodriguez smiled as her ship jumped toward Earth. They had done it. Against impossible odds and overwhelming opposition, humanity had earned recognition as equals. The rest would come with time and patience and the same determination that had brought them this far. The stars awaited. The galaxy was open, and humanity was ready to show everyone what they were truly capable of when given the chance.